Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Naomi O'Neill. This evening we are honoured to acknowledge His Excellency Mr. Kazuhiro Suzuki, Ambassador for Japan, General T.T. Chai T. On Tong, Chief of Joint Staff, Royal Thai Armed Forces, and the Honourable Ronald Moultrie, United States Under Secretary of Defence for Intelligence and Security, accompanied by Lieutenant General Gavin Reynolds, Chief of Defence Intelligence, and their accompanying delegations. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial and students on behalf of Kilcavan State School from Kilcavan, Queensland. If you are able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea for this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in service and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Keith Raymond Bird. Keith Bird was born on the 6th of February 1918 in the Sydney suburb of Belmore, the son of Joseph and Elizabeth Bird. Keith Bird joined the Australian Army Service Corps in February 1936, shortly after turning 18, and served for 2.5 years. In late 1937, Bird and 2 friends pleaded guilty to breaking and entering a garage and stealing electric drills and car and bicycle parts. Bird and an accomplice also pleaded guilty to having broken and entered a Belmore schoolhouse and stolen property. For this, Bird received a 2-year good behaviour bond. He was discharged from serving with the Australian Army Service Corps at the request of police. Bird went on to work as a railway employee. Keith Bird enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force at Belmore on the 15th of May 1940. Allotted to the recently raised 2nd 17th Australian Infantry Battalion, Private Bird began initial training at Ingleburn Army Camp, southwest of Liverpool. In October 1940, Private Bird and his comrades in the 2nd 17th Battalion sailed from Sydney Harbour to the Middle East. During the journey, Bird was found asleep at his post whilst acting as sentinel. He was fined and confined to barracks for 2 days as punishment. Arriving in the Middle East, the battalion undertook further training near Gaza in Palestine, before moving to Port Said in mid-December to relieve the garrison. Returning to Palestine in early January, the men conducted a number of exercises until late February. In early March 1941, the 2nd 17th was sent to the desert in Cyrenaica to relieve units of the 6th Division destined for Greece. As part of this, the men took up positions in the foremost defences near Masai Brega, east of Tripoli. Soon after, German forces landed at Tripoli to bolster the Italians. The Germans advanced to the east. The 2nd 17th was involved in a general withdrawal of British forces to Tobruk. When the Axis made a major attack to capture Tobruk at Easter, the 2nd 17th held against German tanks and remained in position while engaging enemy infantry. The German tanks were destroyed by artillery and supporting arms. Bird and his battalion continued to take part in the defence of Tobruk, conducting patrols in no man's land, raiding, occupying the main defensive position and working in the rear areas. The battalion's war diary entry for the 8th of July gives an indication of life at Tobruk. A hot day, everything still, very quiet. The conditions in the forward companies are not pleasant. Even on the quietest of days, there's enemy sniping and mortar fire preventing movement, and men eat, sleep and live in shallow trenches in which there is no standing upright and very little chance of movement. Even though great care is exercised, the flies are in large numbers, fighting boldly for a share of food and refusing to be dislodged from it. The enemy machine guns, snipers and mortars are very accurate, and constant care must be exercised. That day, the enemy did indeed prove accurate. Private Keith Bird was wounded in action, receiving a gunshot wound to the left thigh. He was evacuated to hospital for treatment, but his wound proved mortal, and he died 2 days later on the 10th of July, 1941. He was 23 years old. His remains were buried in Tobruk War Cemetery, where they lie today alongside more than 2,000 Commonwealth servicemen of the Second World War. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my left, amongst 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. A photograph of his headstone is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Keith Raymond Bird, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them. Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.